Earth, 3.8 billion years ago. A world both familiar and alien. The same planet we stand upon today, yet utterly transformed. No continents as we know them, but rather small scattered land masses of bare volcanic rock. No blue skies, but an atmosphere thick with methane, carbon dioxide, and water vapor, giving the heavens a rusty orange hue. No forests or grasslands, no animals swimming in the seas. The land was sterile, and the oceans hosted only the simplest forms of life, invisible to the naked eye. The primordial Earth rotated faster than it does today, creating shorter days and nights. The moon, much closer than in our time, appeared enormous in the sky, raising tremendous tides in the young oceans. The sun, slightly dimmer than it is now, provided less warmth, yet Earth was not cold, kept temperate by the powerful greenhouse effect of its carbon-rich atmosphere. In the shallow waters of these early seas, the first visible evidence of life was taking shape. Stromatolites, layered mounds formed by communities of microorganisms. These structures, some small as pebbles, others large as tables, were built primarily by cyanobacteria, remarkable microbes that had evolved a world-changing ability: photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, the process of capturing sunlight to convert carbon dioxide and water into organic compounds, had actually evolved earlier in simpler forms. But cyanobacteria perfected a more powerful version that produced oxygen as a waste product. This oxygenic photosynthesis would eventually transform the planet, but the revolution would take time. For nearly 1 billion years, the oxygen produced by these ancient microbes was rapidly consumed by chemical reactions with dissolved iron and other elements in the oceans and atmosphere. The world of Earth's first 2 billion years was a microbial one. No plants, no animals, no fungi, just vast populations of single-celled organisms. Yet within this microscopic realm existed remarkable diversity. The 3 great domains of life, bacteria, archaea, and eukarya, had already begun to diverge from their common ancestor. Bacteria and archaea, both prokaryotes lacking complex cellular structures, dominated this early biosphere. They evolved a stunning array of metabolic strategies, ways of harvesting energy and carbon from their environment. Some used sunlight, like the cyanobacteria. Others consumed organic compounds produced by their photosynthetic neighbors. Still others derived energy from inorganic chemical reactions involving hydrogen, sulfur, iron, or nitrogen compounds. Somewhere in this microbial world, perhaps around 2.7 billion years ago, one of the most consequential events in life's history occurred: the evolution of the eukaryotic cell. Unlike their prokaryotic counterparts, eukaryotes possess a true nucleus, a membrane-bound compartment housing their genetic material, and various specialized structures called organelles. The most significant of these organelles, the mitochondrion, appears to have originated when a bacterium was engulfed by a larger cell, but not consumed, instead entering into a mutually beneficial relationship. This endosymbiosis, as scientists call it, gave the host cell access to the bacterium's efficient energy production capabilities. Similarly, chloroplasts, the photosynthetic organelles in plants and algae, originated when photosynthetic bacteria were incorporated into early eukaryotic cells. As photosynthetic organisms proliferated in Earth's oceans, the oxygen they produced began to leave geological signatures. Most notable were banded iron formations, distinctively layered rocks formed when oxygen reacted with iron dissolved in seawater, creating insoluble iron oxides that sank to the seafloor. These rusty deposits, some of the world's richest iron ore reserves today, record the gradual oxygenation of Earth's oceans. For hundreds of millions of years, oxygen production and consumption remained in rough balance. The gas was produced by photosynthetic organisms but quickly consumed by chemical reactions with reduced minerals and gases. This equilibrium would eventually shift, setting the stage for one of the most profound transformations in Earth's history. Around 2.4 billion years ago, the Great Oxygenation Event began. After consuming most of the readily available materials that could react with oxygen, the gas began to accumulate in the atmosphere. This rise in oxygen was nothing short of apocalyptic for many of Earth's inhabitants. For most ancient microbes, adapted to an anaerobic, oxygen-free world, oxygen was highly toxic. Mass extinctions swept through the microbial world as entire ecosystems collapsed. Yet this catastrophe created opportunity. Organisms that could tolerate oxygen survived. Those that could exploit it thrived, as aerobic respiration, using oxygen to break down organic compounds, yields far more energy than anaerobic alternatives. Natural selection favored adaptations to protect against oxygen damage and, eventually, to harness oxygen's power. The rise of oxygen triggered dramatic climatic consequences. Methane, a powerful greenhouse gas abundant in the early atmosphere, reacts with oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water. As atmospheric methane decreased, so did its warming effect. This cooling, combined with other factors, may have contributed to several Snowball Earth episodes, periods when ice covered most or all of the planet's surface. These global glaciations, the most severe climatic events in Earth history, would have posed an existential threat to life. Yet life persisted, perhaps in ice-free refugees around volcanic vents, in deep ocean environments, or in pockets of liquid water beneath the ice. Each glaciation eventually ended when volcanic carbon dioxide, unable to be removed from the atmosphere by normal processes in a frozen world, accumulated enough to generate intense greenhouse warming. As Earth recovered from these climate extremes and oxygen levels stabilized, a new chapter in life's story began. Around 575 million years ago, the first large, complex multicellular organisms appeared in the fossil record. The Ediacaran biota, as they are known, were unlike anything alive today. Strange disc-shaped, frond-like, and quilted creatures that may represent early experiments in multicellular organization. Some Ediacarans may have been animals, others possibly fungi, large protists, or representatives of entirely extinct lineages with no modern descendants. Their world was still predominantly microbial, but for the first time, life was visible to the naked eye on a significant scale. The age of microbes was giving way to an era of macroscopic life. This trend accelerated dramatically around 541 million years ago, with the onset of the Cambrian period. In what seemed like a geological instant, diverse animal forms appeared in the fossil record. The Cambrian Explosion, as this event is called, saw the emergence of most major animal body plans that exist today, along with some that have no modern equivalents. Trilobites, extinct marine arthropods with segmented bodies and compound eyes, became dominant seafloor dwellers. Anomalocaris, meter-long predators with circular jaws and grasping appendages, hunted the early oceans. Primitive chordates, members of the same phylum that includes vertebrates like ourselves, swam alongside strange creatures like Opabinia, with its 5 eyes and frontal grasping appendage. This sudden emergence of complex animal life triggered evolutionary arms races between predators and prey. Animals evolved hard shells and exoskeletons for protection. Predators developed better sensory organs and more efficient methods of capturing prey. These escalating competitive pressures accelerated evolution, generating ever more sophisticated adaptations. The explosion of animal diversity was made possible in part by higher oxygen levels. Complex multicellular organisms require significantly more oxygen than single cells, as they need to supply all their cells with this vital gas. Only when atmospheric oxygen reached sufficient concentrations could large active animals evolve and thrive. Among the myriad animal forms that emerged during this time were the first vertebrates, animals with backbones. These early fish-like creatures lacked jaws and paired fins, resembling modern lampreys or hagfish. They were a minor component of ocean ecosystems dominated by arthropods and other invertebrates, but they carried evolutionary innovations that would prove tremendously successful. The internal skeleton that characterizes vertebrates provided an alternative to the external armor of arthropods. While exoskeletons must be shed to allow growth and limit the size an animal can reach, internal skeletons allow continuous growth. They also provide more efficient attachment points for muscles, enabling more powerful movement. While animals were diversifying in the oceans, another momentous transition was underway: the colonization of land. This process began in earnest during the Silurian period, around 430 million years ago. The first land plants were small, non-vascular forms similar to modern liverworts and mosses, growing in moist areas near water bodies. They lacked roots, stems, and leaves as we know them, instead possessing simpler structures for anchoring to the substrate and photosynthesizing. These pioneers faced formidable challenges. Without water to support their weight, they needed new structural compounds like lignin to stand upright. Without water to transport nutrients and facilitate reproduction, they needed vascular tissues and novel reproductive strategies. Without water to prevent desiccation, they needed waxy cuticles to retain moisture. Plants did not colonize land alone. Various invertebrate groups, including ancestors of modern millipedes, centipedes, spiders, and insects, followed them, feeding on decaying plant matter or preying on other invertebrates. These early terrestrial ecosystems were simple by modern standards, but represented a fundamental expansion of life's domain. The evolution of vascular plants, those with specialized tissues for transporting water and nutrients, accelerated the colonization of land. By the Devonian period, 419–359 million years ago, the first forests appeared, composed of trees such as Archaeopteris that could reach heights of 30 meters. The spread of these forests dramatically increased the amount of photosynthesis occurring on land, further altering atmospheric composition. Meanwhile, in the shallow waters of coastal marshes and estuaries, a group of fish was evolving adaptations that would eventually enable vertebrates to conquer land. These lobe-finned fish possessed muscular fins supported by bones homologous to those in our own arms and legs. They could push themselves along the bottom of shallow water bodies and perhaps make short forays onto land. From such creatures evolved the first tetrapods, four-limbed vertebrates that could truly walk on land. Early examples like Tiktaalik and Ichthyostega retained many fish-like features, including remnants of gills and tails. They likely lived amphibious lifestyles, dividing their time between water and land, perhaps coming ashore to escape predators or exploit food resources unavailable in aquatic environments. As the Devonian gave way to the Carboniferous period, 359–299 million years ago, vast forests covered much of the land. These were not forests as we know them today. There were no flowering plants, no grasses, no deciduous trees shedding their leaves annually. Instead, they were dominated by giant club mosses, horsetails, and ferns, along with the first gymnosperms, non-flowering seed plants, including early conifers. The humid, tropical conditions that prevailed across much of the globe, combined with high carbon dioxide levels, created ideal conditions for plant growth. When these plants died, their remains often accumulated in swamps where decomposition was slowed by acidic, oxygen-poor conditions. Over time, buried under layers of sediment and subjected to heat and pressure, these plant remains would transform into coal, storing carbon that had been removed from the atmosphere millions of years ago. This period also saw the evolution of remarkably large arthropods. Meganeura, a griffinfly, related to modern dragonflies, had a wingspan of up to 65 centimeters. Arthropleura, a millipede relative, could grow more than 2 meters long. These giants were made possible in part by higher oxygen levels. The Carboniferous atmosphere may have contained up to 35% oxygen, compared to 21% today, allowing arthropods to overcome the limitations their respiratory systems impose on their size in modern conditions. Amphibians diversified during this time, some growing to crocodile-like proportions and occupying top predator niches in freshwater ecosystems. But they remained tied to water for reproduction, laying unprotected eggs that would desiccate on dry land. This constraint would be overcome by one of their descendants, the amniotes, animals whose embryos develop within fluid-filled membranes that protect them from drying out. The amniotic egg represents one of the most significant adaptations in vertebrate evolution. By providing a self-contained aquatic environment for embryonic development, it freed vertebrates from the need to return to water to reproduce. Early amniotes, the common ancestors of reptiles, birds, and mammals, first appeared in the late Carboniferous and would go on to dominate terrestrial ecosystems. Within this amniote lineage, a momentous split occurred. One branch, the sauropsids, would give rise to modern reptiles and birds. The other, the synapsids, would lead to mammals. These two lineages would take dramatically different evolutionary paths, employing contrasting strategies to solve the challenges of terrestrial life. The flourishing of life on land and sea was dramatically interrupted approximately 252 million years ago by the most severe mass extinction in Earth's history. The Permian-Triassic Extinction Event, often called the Great Dying, eliminated an estimated 96% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species. Entire groups that had dominated the Paleozoic era, including trilobites and many families of brachiopods and crinoids, disappeared forever. The causes of this catastrophe appear to have been complex, likely triggered by massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia. These eruptions injected enormous quantities of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, causing severe global warming. Oceans warmed, reducing their capacity to hold oxygen and creating vast dead zones where marine life could not survive. On land, soaring temperatures and declining oxygen levels made vast regions uninhabitable. The aftermath of the Great Dying was a desolate world with simplified ecosystems dominated by a few disaster taxa, hardy generalists that could survive in challenging conditions. Recovery was slow, taking millions of years to rebuild complex food webs. Yet this evolutionary reset created opportunities for survivors to diversify into vacant ecological niches. Among these survivors were archosaurs, reptiles whose modern descendants include crocodilians and birds, and synapsids, including cynodonts, the direct ancestors of mammals. Both groups would play major roles in the next chapter of Earth's history. From archosaurs would arise the most spectacular land animals ever to exist, the dinosaurs. From cynodonts would evolve the first mammals, small nocturnal creatures living in the shadow of the reptilian giants. Dinosaurs first appeared in the fossil record during the Middle to Late Triassic period, around 240–230 million years ago. These early forms were modest in size and diversity compared to their later descendants. They shared their world with many other reptile groups, including ancestors of crocodilians, flying pterosaurs, and various now extinct lineages. Gradually, dinosaurs outcompeted many of these groups and became increasingly dominant. By the beginning of the Jurassic period, 201 million years ago, dinosaurs had split into the major lineages that would characterize them throughout their reign: the Saurischia, including the long-necked sauropodomorphs and predatory theropods, and the Ornithischians, including various herbivorous groups such as stegosaurs, ankylosaurs, and ceratopsians. The Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, 201–66 million years ago, witnessed the golden age of dinosaurs. Sauropods, the largest land animals ever, reached lengths of over 30 meters and weights exceeding 70 tons. Theropods evolved into diverse forms, from the enormous Tyrannosaurus and Giganotosaurus to smaller feathered varieties that would eventually give rise to birds. Ornithischians developed elaborate defensive structures, from the plates of Stegosaurus to the horns and frills of Triceratops. While dinosaurs dominated the land, other reptile groups conquered the seas and skies. Ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs became specialized marine predators, while pterosaurs, some with wingspans exceeding 10 meters, ruled the air. Together, these diverse reptiles created ecosystems as complex as those of modern times, though strikingly different in composition. A quiet revolution was occurring beneath the feet of the dinosaurs. Flowering plants, angiosperms, first appeared in the early Cretaceous, around 125 million years ago. Their key innovation was the flower, a specialized reproductive structure that facilitates pollination by animals. This relationship between plants and pollinators, initially insects, later also birds and mammals, proved extraordinarily successful. Angiosperms diversified with astonishing speed. By the late Cretaceous, they had become dominant in many ecosystems, outcompeting the conifers, ginkgos, cycads, and ferns that had previously characterized terrestrial flora. This transformation of global vegetation had profound effects on animal life, creating new food sources and habitats. Today, flowering plants account for the vast majority of plant species, from grasses and daisies to oaks and orchids. The age of dinosaurs ended abruptly 66 million years ago when an asteroid approximately 10 kilometers in diameter struck Earth in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. The impact released energy equivalent to billions of Hiroshima bombs, creating a crater more than 150 kilometers across. Material ejected from the impact site re-entered the atmosphere worldwide, heating the air and igniting global wildfires. The immediate effects were catastrophic, but the long-term consequences were equally devastating. Dust and aerosols injected into the atmosphere blocked sunlight for months or years, dramatically cooling the global climate and suppressing photosynthesis. The collapse of plant productivity triggered cascading failures throughout food webs, both on land and in the oceans. The Cretaceous Paleogene, KPG extinction, eliminated approximately 75% of species, including all non-avian dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and marine reptiles. The empty ecological niches left by these extinctions created unprecedented evolutionary opportunities for the survivors. Among these survivors were certain birds, the only remaining dinosaurs, crocodilians, turtles, lizards, snakes, amphibians, and critically, various mammals. Mammals had existed since the Triassic period, but had remained mostly small nocturnal creatures throughout the Mesozoic era, unable to compete directly with dinosaurs for dominant roles in terrestrial ecosystems. With their major competitors gone, mammals underwent an explosive adaptive radiation, rapidly evolving to fill vacated niches. Within just 10 million years after the extinction, mammals had diversified into many of the major groups we recognize today. The early Cenozoic era saw the emergence of recognizable ancestors of modern mammal orders. Early primates moved through the trees of dense forests. Primitive horses the size of foxes browsed on vegetation. Ancestors of whales still walked on land but were beginning to adapt to semi-aquatic lifestyles. The predecessors of elephants, bats, carnivores, and rodents all made their first appearances during this time of unprecedented mammalian diversification. Climate played a crucial role in shaping this new mammalian world. The early Cenozoic was mostly warm and humid, with extensive forests covering much of the land. Tropical and subtropical conditions extended far north and south of their current ranges. Antarctica, still connected to South America and Australia, hosted temperate forests rather than the ice sheets of today. Beginning around 34 million years ago, global climate began a long-term cooling trend. The separation of Antarctica from other southern continents allowed the formation of a circumpolar current that thermally isolated the continent, facilitating the growth of its ice sheets. Carbon dioxide levels gradually declined, reducing the greenhouse effect. Northern latitudes began to experience freezing conditions seasonally, then year-round. This climatic shift dramatically altered global ecosystems. Forests contracted while grasslands expanded, a process accelerated by the evolution of C4 photosynthesis, a variant particularly efficient in warm, dry, high-light conditions. The spread of grasslands created new opportunities for mammalian herbivores, which evolved high-crowned teeth resistant to the abrasive silica in grass tissues. Predators, in turn, evolved adaptations for pursuing prey in open terrain. Among the many mammalian lineages evolving during this time was our own. Approximately 7 million years ago in Africa, the evolutionary lines leading to humans and chimpanzees diverged. By 4 million years ago, our Australopithecine ancestors were walking upright but retained many ape-like features. Their brains were only slightly larger than those of modern chimpanzees. They likely used simple tools, sticks and unmodified stones, but had not yet developed the sophisticated technology that would characterize later humans. Around 2.5 million years ago, the first members of our genus, Homo, appeared. These early humans had larger brains than Australopithecines and began manufacturing stone tools deliberately shaped for specific purposes. Several human species evolved in Africa and later spread to other continents. These included Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, and eventually Homo neanderthalensis in Europe and Asia, and Homo sap. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. Also, leave a comment with at least 8 words. Your feedback helps us grow the channel and create even better content for you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.